Here is a TLDR, simplified summary of findings without wading through the studies and watching the population calculations. If you watch this and have questions or opinions, watch the full version first and use the source list. I will tell you to do so if your question or statement can be answered or disproved there. There were two primary claims made by this creator that I researched. The first is that transgender parents are sterilizing and mutilating children who are presumed to be transgender. The second is there are hundreds of thousands of testimonies from children who are now adults who regret their care. And after those, we researched and discussed the mental health component regarding the comment about suicide. For the first claim, we used study and demographic data to determine that there are 399,000 transgender parents in the USA. Any and all assumptions we made to keep things simple along the way were made in a way that favors this argument. We determined the 399,000 transgender parents have approximately 774,060 kids. Of those kids, 36% are 12 to 17 years old, which is 278,662 kids. Of those kids, 3.3% are likely to identify as transgender. That's 9,493 kids that are at risk of receiving medical intervention from this segment of the LGBTQ+ population per the claim. This is 0.013% of the youth in the United States or 0.04% of the youth aged 12 to 17 in the USA. With our at-risk population identified, we then went on to determine how many of those would receive medical interventions in the form of drugs and surgery. To match the known population growth, we also doubled the number of procedures and determined that 1.4% will go on to receive these interventions. That is 134 kids receiving any intervention and only 8 of those being surgery. While this data already sufficiently disproves the claim, we also need to know how many of these kids regret the care they received. We calculated that 6, rounded up from 5.5, of these kids are likely to regret their care. To add perspective, that is 0.002% of all of the 278,662 children with transgender parents. With the original claim disproved, I decided to expand the claim to children of all LGBTQ+ people. We know this is 5 million kids, so we did all the math again with the same methodology and found 2,310 kids receiving medical interventions, with 132 of those being surgery. This is 0.003% of the minor population in the USA. I decided to try one more method to favor the argument and made the assumption that no cis-hetero parent ever lets their child get intervention and assigned all of the kids in the USA that receive these treatments to the LGBTQ+ community. This method gave us 9,768 kids getting medical intervention, with 556 of those being surgery. This gave us 0.01% of the youth population or 0.04% of the youth population aged 12 to 17. Even adding bias to favor the argument, we land on less than 1/10 of 1% of youth aged 12 to 17. This claim has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt to be demonstrably false. Moving on to the second claim. In order to prove there are hundreds of thousands of testimonies, we need to prove there are hundreds of thousands of people who regret their care to provide these testimonies. To make this easy, we assumed everyone who regrets their care provides a testimony. We used study data to determine how many people are likely to detransition and how many of those do so for reasons that indicate regret. Then we expand the data based on the population growth from the year 2024 to 2025, leaving us with 46,587 people in the United States in 2025 who regret receiving gender-affirming care in the form of drugs or surgery. This claim has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt to be demonstrably false. In this video, I also addressed articles that were provided by a commenter on the initial post, discussed current legal cases of detransitioning people, suing medical professionals, and reviewed why legal recourse is important but does not justify the removal of this population's right to access care. I then reviewed regret rates of other common surgeries because ignoring analogous factors would be a disservice. They're all higher than gender-affirming surgery rates. Then I reviewed the cosmetic surgery rates for minors and found that even with data from just 762 surgeons, breast and genital surgeries on cisgender minors is 0.004% of kids in the US, while all surgeries for transgender minors is only 0.0007%. Once again, proving that the focus on transgender or gender dysphoric individuals and medical care involving drugs and surgery is not the right focus. We then entered a discussion on mental health care and reviewed mental health data from these populations. Suicide is a major problem in these communities, and we determined that lack of access or ability to get mental health care is a large contributing factor, as is the lack of feeling of acceptance by the community. We concluded, if we want to solve these problems, we need comprehensive and universal mental and physical health care, and we need to accept the thoughts and feelings of others to foster safety and community while these individuals seek out therapy and other medical interventions as they and their healthcare team see fit. And of course, in those rare cases where something does go wrong, they do have the legal system for recourse. That's the TLDR summary of everything that we did here. If you have questions, if there's anything that's weirding you out, go watch the full video. I will just ping you back to it if you're asking questions that can be answered there. Of course, all of the resources are linked below in a document. I hope you learned something. I hope you had some great takeaways. Keep discourse civil, And let me know down in the comments if there are other topics that you would like to see covered in this level of depth. That's it for me.